So we have, you need to understand that there's this conference committee that gets together in the fall before the conference and starts yakking about the program and what should be considered. And one of the things that came up was, my world is falling apart, I don't know how I'm going to survive, everything's changing. So that came up with this subject, which is around surviving change and transforming our world, because it is always changing. So we have three excellent speakers and talking about different types of challenge. And one of the things that came up that was an imperative was we need to talk about the challenge of climate change. And Christine too is going to speak to you about that. And just a little funny note that when I contacted Christine, I said, you were recommended by someone who has left Peel, which I thought was actually a pretty high compliment. Someone that left the organization, and when I spoke to Christine, I know she's the right speaker. So without further ado, I'll bring Christine up.
Thank you, Murry, very much for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've had a nice long lunch and a conversation amongst. I was not able to get to this morning. Unfortunately, I was actually at an event this morning that was launching a smart blue roof. So you may want to ask me about what that is, because it is a true marriage of technology and sustainability. But I have not usually presented at a data conference, a technology conference, and so Murry won't tell me who recommended me to come and speak, but I am going to track him down or her down, because I think this is the place that I should be showing up, amongst other places as well. And certainly my talk, which is not a technical talk, it is bringing many worlds together to really push at the imperative of climate change. So with that, so we've got, now Murry did give me the how to do this. Let me see how that works. It looks different. Okay, there we go. So really what I wanted to do is, well, perhaps before I jump to the outline, so Peel Region, I am the director of the Office of Climate Change and Energy Management at that municipality, which is a municipality, if you're not familiar with Southern Ontario, we're about an hour east of here. So City of Mississauga, City of Brampton, Town of Caledon, those are the lower tier municipalities that make up the region of Peel. So my office there looks at across the corporation's emissions, as well as the risks that we have to climate change, as well as we work with our community partners to see what we need to do and how can we do it faster. And I think that's probably the theme of what I'm going to talk about with some core pieces that I think are really important. But generally speaking, the outline, I am just going to talk very briefly about the climate emergency, make sure my audience is all on the same page. A glimpse of where we've been. I've picked the last 10 years, a snapshot of where we're at now, and I'll spend a bit more time on where we have to go, and more importantly, how to get there, and we got to get there fast, people. So I will also pepper in between some of these main pieces, some case examples coming out of Peel Region, just to ground what I'm saying into some concrete examples to help with making something that's a bit more conceptual, perhaps, than what you've talked to this today, to make it real. So the climate emergency. So this is the data. I don't want to cast everybody as a data person per se in the audience, but the science, which is data-driven, is unequivocal. We have a situation of rapid planetary warming that is meeting planetary boundaries faster than any modeling had yet thought it would, and it is unequivocal that is driven by human burning of fossil fuel. What that really means, because it's planetary, it's a global issue, it is all-encompassing. Climate change will hit every system that we can think of. Very often we think ecosystems, environmental. Yes, absolutely. The intrinsic nature of that means because we are dependent on a healthy, vibrant, and balanced ecosystem across planets, we are looking at systems of economic systems, food systems, health systems, urban planning and rural planning systems. We are not, there is not one sector, one government, one country. It will be an uneven hit and impact, and we certainly have different responsibilities, but it is all encompassing, and it is a disruption. Part of that in itself makes this such a difficult and feeling untractable challenge, and ladle onto that the rate of the planetary warming right now and the rate of change in the response that we all have to make, which is what Yuri was really talking about, feeling this pressure to change. Well, the pressure to change and respond to climate change is increasingly, I wouldn't call it a burden, but responsibility. So that's all I'm going to talk about from the real climate change side, but we can unpack things as we need to. But those are the main things that we need to keep in mind. It does affect everyone, it's real, and it's happening now, and it's happening fast. So just to, again, see where everybody's level setting for I chose the last 10 years. So roughly 2013, 2014 till now. And I'll say at that time, we were starting that decade or that period of 10 years quite strong. In Ontario, it was the canceling of coal-fired generated electricity, huge decision and direction policy-wise for the province. COP21, the famous one, 2015, the Paris Agreement was signed by the leading countries. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. Very importantly, in that commitment, there were science-based targets that were adopted and in principle approved, and that is where we're getting most of our targets from today. Cap and trade program in Ontario was sort of a following to that COP21 agreement. That's really looking at how emission reductions can be systematically reduced through market and industry forces and create revenues, just feed back into a clean energy transition. Some of it will be called also a carbon pricing. That is an example of that kind of system. Also during this period of time, around the late, anywhere from 2017 to the next 3 or 4 years after that, municipalities really stepped up in their role as needing to be part of the climate solution. Municipalities own the most public infrastructure across Canada, most exposed to the type of extreme weather that is changing. We're also reasonably high emitters, and we need to lead by example. So municipalities rolled out climate plans almost across the board, leading larger municipalities, but a lot of other ones followed. And there was a lot of early adoption as well in terms of the available low carbon technology at the time. Electric vehicles probably had their first start. Green fleets were something that were part of this last decade. Towards the last 10 years, though, in that 10-year timeline, we also had a lot of momentum disruption. We had a change in government in Ontario, 2018. Very quickly, a cancellation of a very new cap and trade program to no cap and trade program. Resistance and risk aversion, that is always part of change, certainly resurfaced probably a bit more boldly than many of us were quite ready for. COVID-19 was a massive, I would say, to say it was a distraction is not fair for the harm that was caused by COVID-19, but it brought all resources into a different direction. It was also a very, very short period of time where we had global emission reductions not for climate reasons, but we've now rebounded. Every nation has rebounded to at or above pre-COVID-19 emission reductions. So it diverted resources and attention for, as we know, a couple of years, but there's a lot to learn from that as well. So in that process, incremental progress was made on what was already declared as a climate emergency, which most nations and municipalities alike had also declared in this time. So where are we right now? Just one case example of Peel Region of that past 10 years. So we were one of those municipalities who did develop a climate change master plan in 2019 to govern this decade. We did declare a climate emergency. We set our science-based target, 45% reduction below 2010 levels by 2030, and that is consistent with the Paris Agreement, consistent with all countries, aligns, not exactly Canada's, but aligns, and it's more aggressive than Ontario's, but it's certainly aligned. So we have this plan that is governing what we are doing this decade, and we are currently starting this year to look at the refresh. It's a 10-year plan, it's been 5 years, so we're refreshing it this year. So snapshot of right now. We are not on target for our 2030 reduction targets. There is no municipality that I am aware of in North America that is on target, even New York, which is a very, very progressive. There are a few countries that are on track, very, very few, but Canada is one of the dead last in terms of our commitments under the Paris Agreement. In Ontario specifically, even though I had mentioned we took ourselves off of coal back in 2013, 2014, the current government has been slowly adding natural gas on as part of our energy mix and slowly increasing that. So we are getting dirtier in our grid as opposed to cleaner, and that has a lot of implication because electrification is a very important pathway that we have to decarbonize. So we're kind of playing at odds at that way. I'd like to take a snapshot of municipal leadership, however. It is still there. I do feel that where I work, and it's measurable because we're holding the line on the emissions that we were able to reduce through our incremental progress last decade. We're holding the line, which is really important because our municipalities are growing at extremely high rate and expect to even accelerate in the coming next 10 years. So we've been able to offset new emissions with the work that we are doing and with important work like setting net zero emission standards for new construction. So we're at least offsetting the burden of new emissions as we hold the line. And we are also continuing to invest on what do we have to do to get past this holding point and into early acceleration and scale, also investing and looking at climate risk. So it's not the story we want to tell, but it's an important one of leadership. We have to take on the challenge. I think what's very confidence building is we know what to do. We do know this. We have pathways, we have plans that tell us how to get to our 2030 or our 2050 targets. We have proven technology that we can implement this decade. So I'm talking heat pumps, I'm talking solar, I'm talking other renewables, I'm talking very simple things like more insulation and energy conservation. We forget about those things. It's critical. There are other pathways as well that the technology is used elsewhere and can be implemented here. We're not talking about waiting for carbon capture and hydrogen to be our points of where we transform or where we decide to go. That is part, I believe, in the future, but I'm talking this right now in the next 10 years, we know what to do. We have technology that doesn't need to be, I would say, only piloted. Just a bit, I came this morning, I said that the smart blue roof is one of those technologies that really should be scaling at this point rather than being demonstrated. And of course, we're moving very, very hard now into looking at climate risk, which is what's at risk from extreme weather and the extreme heat that is coming. Wildfires are an example of things that we are now responding, reacting to. So those are things that we are doing. We know what to do, but it's really about how to scale and how to accelerate that we are confounded by. So let's have a case example for Peel region in terms of the snapshot of right now. This is just to demonstrate that upper line is if we did nothing. That upper dashed red line, we did no action, we would be at those emissions, and that would be our forecast out to 2030. The black line is what we've already measured and done. You can see it's pretty flat, but it's not going up because we have been experiencing tremendous growth. With growth, emissions come up. So a little bit more of a flat line forecasted to 2024, that's our decision point. That middle line, which is orange, is what we know we have funded in what we refer to as our capital plan. If we just do that, we'll pretty much hold the line out to 2030. Our target is that 2030 target, that gray dash line. So our climate plan gives us a pathway there, which is that green one. It's not currently fully funded, so that's part of it. There's also issues around capacity and other enabling policies that would need to be put in place, and I'm going to talk about how to turn that orange line to that green line. But we know a lot is a good thing, and a lot of this is all data-driven as well. So what is the next 10 years? This is that scale, this is that acceleration. So I put 3 things on here that I think are foundational and in principle. It is about deep integration, it's about unparalleled coordination, and probably most importantly, it's about accountability. Deep integration, priorities, processes, and performance, and people. I'm going to go a little bit more into that in the next slide, but the unparalleled coordination, That's about really sharing resources, which is both people, funding, skill sets, sharing risks. We have to get past a risk aversion of who's going to take the blame if it doesn't work. Get past that mentality, and of course the shared outcomes are there for us all to benefit from. The accountability needs to be at all levels of government, it needs to be private sector, and it needs to be you and me. It's behavior as much as corporate responsibility. So I want to go into the deep integration a little bit more. What does that mean? What does deeping with other priorities, what does that actually mean? So this is taken from a municipal lens, government lens. So we have other emergencies and other priorities and crises, the housing crisis we're all aware of. We're particularly around the affordable housing. I've talked about the accelerated growth. We have expectations from our province to build 1.5 million homes by 2031. With that comes the capital infrastructure that is part of the emissions generations profile. Human health and emergency response. We're all hearing about whether it's chronic disease, whether it's vector-borne diseases like Lyme disease, those that will be subject to mortality and morbidity because of the heat. Not everybody has cooling. There's lots of things in here that come, the digital transformation and AI. That's both, I put these lists down because both of them are either users of energy and thus emission emitters, and will grow if those priorities grow, but they're also vulnerabilities and risks. The digital transformation piece in particular, the interesting part for me there is the energy use that does come with large data centers, and as we digitize, what does that mean? What does that look like? And then the vulnerability for energy resilience. If that goes, our grid goes down, which brownouts will be probably part of Ontario, how does the grid stay resilient when we're all become dependent on digital operations and business commerce? I'll go a little faster here. Processes, this is not gonna be that one, it's actually one of the most important ones here. The budget process, the procurement process, capital planning, long-term processes. At Peel Region, we are moving these and deeply embedding the climate lens. You can tell me as a corporation what you value. You show me your budget, I will tell you what you value. That has to get into the budget. And if it did to get in the budget, it needs to be in a long-term capital plan. Long-term thinking is the key for moving us through where we are now to where we need to go on a continuum, because change will be continuous in this issue. And I'll just say the procurement process, Peel Region developing a sustainable procurement. This is how we are influencing the supply chain. This is how we're influencing the market. We are signaling what we as a corporation, very powerful purchasing power, what do we expect our vendors to be doing? So replicate what we are, leading by example. So these are just examples of processes that must embed climate change. If they don't, the corporation will not reflect and it will remain siloed and optional. And if I have time and money, I'll do it. If I don't, I'll go to my regular work. So just with that idea, the other thing is people. Embed in performance management goals, climate change. This is moving in the organization. We haven't got there yet. We're now talking with HR, who are recruiting, who are retaining, who are we promoting, what are their values, blah, blah, blah. Accountability, those are ways and different forms that we can be accountable. I can talk more about that later. Surviving constant change, it's leadership. It's building your organizational capacity with net zero ambition, not separate. And when we get to a point where climate action is just good business, we've probably got to where we want to be. I'm going to end my presentation with this slide, kind of for this audience, but it's one of my favorite slides that have come from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. It is probably based on the best data that I have seen, and it brings to the foreground the imperative, because it's the people, and it's every child in this projection will only know a hotter world. If you're hoping to retire in the next 20 years or sooner, or even later, I guess, the way that we're looking, you're going to want to have your professional influence felt right now, because the warming's already locked in to a certain extent, and the choices are there, very high warming to very low. So right now is the time that we have to make these decisions on what we are going to do and what we're going to commit and what's our role. So with that, I will stop there with my other message of this decade does matter. Thank you.
Those glasses yours? Glasses?
I read when I read, so I always forget them. Thank you.
Well, Thanks very much. I'm getting more scared every time we have a presentation on climate change. I won't be around to see the bad stuff, but you younger folks need to really pay attention to this. When we were talking about, trends, surviving change, one of the things that, and I've been involved in IT for a long time, that's constantly changing is IT. So the committee felt that having a discussion on digital transformation would be a good idea. And certainly there has been significant digital transformation in the city of Kitchener. And I mentioned that to the mayor this morning, that he had many good staff, and one of those good staff is going to present next, and that's Dan Murry, the Director of Technology, Innovation and Services for the city. Dan.
It's dark up here, so I need a light so I can see my notes. Thanks, Yuri. Good afternoon, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about our experiences with digital transformation. My slides are extremely limited here. So digital transformation is really a fairly modern term. When you look at it, we've been transforming everything since computers first arrived. To me, I look at digital transformation, it speaks to the increased pace of change and the need to bring entire organizations along with that. Bringing in those digital technologies and services. So it's a lot more about building the culture in an organization to embrace digital than it is about the technology you're using. All organizations have areas that have recognized the benefits of leveraging technology early on and saw the value of online services. Finance departments were often the first ones that got computers in municipalities because they couldn't bring that many people in to compute all of that, so they brought in the computers. We've had work management systems. City of Kitchener is actually one that got a lot of our GIS staff here. GIS was an early technology that was adopted because it was recognized that it is a lot of benefit to the organization. There's still many areas, though, that in our organizations that can be laggards with the adoption of technology and online services for a variety of reasons. It can be old school thinking that in-person service is the way to do it. They can't change that. It can be institutionalized knowledge of staff that just prevents them from seeing a different way of delivering the services, or it's just that they don't know how to get to digital. For the City of Kitchener, we began our digital transformation in that cultural sense in 2017 when we developed the city's first digital strategy, and the mayor mentioned that this morning, which we called Digital Kitchener. The goal was to rally the city around a common vision for leveraging technology and digital innovation. Digital Kitchener contained 4 themes: connected, innovative, on-demand, and inclusive. The connected theme imagines using smart technologies like IoT devices and providing the connectivity that's required to really give the horsepower for a community to thrive in a digital environment. A few highlights of this theme. One of the first things we did when we put Digital Kitchener out there was installed an intelligent streetlight network, which has saved the city significant electricity costs over the years by allowing the remote dimming of the lights, and also formed the basis of an IoT network all across the city. We've done things like lease city land to locate cellular towers in underserved locations. That's often a contentious thing where cell towers go, but if you can pick a place that the city owns, place it, it's a lot easier to get that through with less community concern. And we've also pressed to get high-speed fiber internet infrastructure available throughout the city to provide the needed bandwidth for Smart City. The innovative theme speaks to changing the culture of the city to embrace new ideas and create an environment where people are excited to collaborate and feel supported to succeed. As a result of Digital Kitchener, we took advantage of our ongoing partnership with Communitech, and we opened an innovation lab here in this building, which is a short walk from our City Hall. The lab provides support and space to work on exciting new projects in an environment that encourages approaching things differently. The lab opened in 2017 and has been operating here since. We've built programs to leverage innovative procurement to allow tackling challenge statements rather than dictating a solution through an RFP process. And we have a budget actually set aside by council this year to pursue some of that. It's the first time there's been money set aside particularly for that. And we've increased the capacity to enable more staff mobility, including remote work and supporting cross-functional teams to work on projects. The on-demand theme speaks to the value of data in an organization and offering convenient and intuitive digital service options. Some highlights of this theme. We did embrace open data in our organization. Murry actually helped with this many years ago. And put the stake in the ground with an open by default approach, making city data available to the public. We built an online service portal called My Kitchener, where residents can build a profile that reflects where they live and their interest in our services, so that content to them is more relevant to them. If they live in the south end of the city and they've got kids, they can pick things that are relevant for them. Might be activity programs, things that are happening in their neighborhood. The portal also enabled single sign-on to other online services through the city, such as their tax and utility billing. Less excitement about that, but still a necessity. The inclusive theme recognizes that all the residents of the city do not have equal access to technology, that digital transformation would create a wider digital divide if we didn't take steps to address it. So under this theme, we've expanded access to free public Wi-Fi in all our public facilities, major parks, and even outdoors around our city facilities. That was largely due to COVID, and in many public spaces. We provide public access to technology programs in all our community centers for people that don't have a computer, and with other agencies, partner with them to deliver access to technology. And we've also been able to redirect the revenue from the cell tower land leases that I mentioned earlier back into programs that support digital inclusion for community benefit. Kitchener has been making great progress on our digital transformation efforts. After the introduction of Digital Kitchener, we had the Innovation Lab, we had invested in the streetlight network, and had a steady stream of projects supporting the 4 themes of Digital Kitchener each year. All of the projects mentioned above required significant collaboration with stakeholders and building the right teams to deliver these significant digital advancements. And then along came March of 2020. Like all of us, our organization was immediately propelled into a digital appetite we'd never experienced before. As horrible as the pandemic was, it was a boon for digital transformation that we could have never imagined. Our technology investments had positioned us very well for it. We had just implemented Office 365 and had planned to roll out in 2020. That pretty much happened overnight. Suddenly, every division was looking to reimagine their services and move them online. They were forced to think about how to provide services to residents differently, and no options were too radical. We moved a significant part of the workforce out of the office and into their homes in a few days. The entire organization moved their meetings to Microsoft Teams seemingly overnight. Staff were collaborating on documents, projects, and reports in real time. Many services that were quickly moved online during the pandemic have remained. They may have been quick, simple solutions, but they also solved a problem, and they remain valued options, and citizen adoption is very positive. So the pandemic really showed us what was possible when people are forced to go digital fast. Unfortunately, the pace of change, as much as IT people really enjoyed it, was not sustainable for the organizations. So our efforts must return back to what makes digital transformation successful in the long term. So first off is involving stakeholders for ideas and feedback throughout the journey, collaborating with city staff, the public, and our partners. Second is being brave in our ideas. Be brave is something we actually adopted out of Digital Kitchener to remind people to challenge and look at different options. So instead, considering how could we instead of this is how we do it. And the third is storytelling. So storytelling was something that didn't seem terribly important to me in the past, but as we got into this, I started to realize that if we don't share our successes and learnings openly, we're not spreading that message both within our organization and across the community. It can also help people believe that it can be safe to fail if you're doing it transparently enough. Where there are challenges, where things don't work, if you share that, it helps people understand that not every initiative, not every innovation is going to be a success. So in conclusion, I would suggest that digital transformation isn't a milestone that we can mark on a project plan. It's a continuous journey. Building a culture that embraces digital technology and services. It's building organizational capacity to develop well-designed technology services and digital service channels. It's about taking the time to make sure that both our organization and community is brought along with on that journey. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, Dan. As you say, constantly changing. The final speaker we have is Merlin Chatwin, and he's Executive Director of Open North. I first met Merlin back in 2017 when Go Open Data was in City of London at the Public Library, which was a great venue, by the way. And he was controversial then, and I suspect he may be controversial now. So please welcome Merlin.
I don't know what to do with that kind of introduction. When you've done enough of these, you recognize a couple truths. One is that when you're the third panel, or the third person on the panel, that you don't actually have any time, or else you're cutting into the Q&A. And two, you've probably heard enough from people that look like me, so I'll be quick. So yeah, I'm Merlin Chatwin. I'm the Executive Director at Open North. Open North, for those of you who don't know, has been in the data space since about 2011. Really starting with that intersection of like civic tech, when civic tech was emerging, and open data. And started to try and provide technology to government when they either wouldn't or couldn't do it themselves. And I think some of the earlier panelists said, you figure out pretty quickly that the technology is not really the problem, right? The technology is there, it can be done. It's that culture that needs to be impacted. And so really shifted towards data governance, and we're still in the data or in the civic space. But I would say that we're equally, we work with government at all orders, and then we also work with civil society, and again, mostly those who exist within that civic space, and then some private sector organizations as well. Our focus is on data governance and digital strategies, and we do this through service and research and capacity building, some training and such. I think one of the things that will be different from my few slides is that we really exist globally, and so our perspective is really broad. And so recognizing that climate change and digital transformation all have global impacts and sort of global antecedents, that's something that we're dealing with every day. So I tried to figure out how to do this surviving change from an organizational perspective. And so I came up with a few different just perspectives on it. And one, for Open North, we've long considered ourselves a values-led organization. And so what would that mean through a service delivery lens? And for us, the first point would be that, when we're talking to potential partners and clients, the things that are their passions and their priorities and their pressures are often the entry points. It's the things that they're thinking about every day, but often not the root of the problem. And that's a service, that's a perspective that we can provide, is how do we drill down and figure out what the real core issues are. And often that's through a really solid discovery process and a problem identification. And a lot of times, because people in our space understand problem identification, it's an interrogation of the problem identification that has happened and the data that has been informing it and where those data gaps are. I don't know what that black box is. Anyways. And so just to ground that in an example, we were asked by an organization to develop a data dashboard, some way to visualize data, GHG emissions data. And when we started to do the discovery, it became pretty quickly apparent that that was just the way that they had figured out how to demonstrate that things were happening, and the thing that they wanted to visualize, and they wanted to have some way for people to be able to understand data. But clearly the dashboard was sort of a means to an end, and couldn't really be the starting point. And so through the discovery process, became pretty clear that what they actually wanted was a way to assemble data and take different sources of data and have what we landed on was a federated data hub where you could combine sources of data from the city. You could have data from your hydro, your gas, private sector. One of the things that we see more and more is that government is no longer has a monopoly over data. And especially as we get into smaller local governments, a lot of the data necessary for climate action plans doesn't exist at the government level, and they're having to procure it every time they're doing a plan. And so how do we then support cross-sectoral data sharing? It's not through the development of a data dashboard, though that could be a longer-term layer on top of it. Creating data hubs would allow for some short-term work, as well as looking longer term at AI applications and predictive analytics. And one of the things I thought, and it came up when we met before this, is one of our roles is that identification of silos. And so whether that's within civil society or in the cities, and one of the topics that came up when we're talking about having the first speaker be climate and the second one be digital transformation, we put out a report, shameless plug for a report that we just did last year on data governance and climate action. And the research that we did looked at climate action plans across Canada at the municipal level. And one of the things that we saw was that the climate action plans reference necessary digital technology and data, but they didn't reference municipal digital transformation plans or data governance plans or smart city plans, whatever we're labeling these plans for moving and introducing new technology. And in fact, a lot of them said these reductions are dependent on new technologies emerging that we don't know yet. So we've got a 2030 plan that is dependent on technology that doesn't exist or that is not known at the municipal space. And so one of the places that we position ourselves is how do we make that connection? How do we support municipalities, especially the small and medium-sized municipalities who don't have teams like this? How do we support them to break down the data silos? And this is learning from open data, where we've seen that in the rush to open data, we sort of often glossed over the need to improve data management, right? So open by default, we want to get data out, but we can't actually share it across departments. That's an issue. So especially when we're looking at something like climate change, which is the interconnected pieces across departments is significant. And then, yeah, the last piece that I'll say, and I mentioned it a bit, is that facilitating cross-sectoral collaboration. There's, one of the other struggles that we came up against in open data was this dichotomy of open versus closed. So as cities, as organizations with private data, we can't open it. Oftentimes it's not possible, and for good reason, but that doesn't mean that it can't be shared. I mean, doesn't mean that it can't have other people having access to it in a controlled way. And so looking at what the real risks are and how do we mitigate them versus just perceived risk of it's scary thinking about sharing outside of an enterprise. And then the second piece that I was thinking about in surviving change is how do we survive as organizations? And now, local governments are always going to survive, right? Because we need them. But organizations like ours, we need to adapt. We need to figure out what our positioning is. We need to figure out how to maintain staff and organizational culture. And so I'm going to read, we went through a process about a year and a half ago now, and really outlining our values as an organization and how we're going to live them. And this is the last one that we have, is that Open Doors staff and partners are highly skilled professionals with diverse backgrounds, ambitions, and lifestyles. Work is only one element of each staff member's full self. While we create an environment where we can laugh together and support each other, we recognize that work is meant to uphold our broader lives and that staff deserve respect for their boundaries and individual goals. A culture of support that balances challenging opportunities with realistic expectations is an active and dynamic process that requires the commitment of all staff. And so, we look at, I think that sounds really nice, and what do we do with it, right? And especially, coming off of COVID-19, where everything was disrupted, looking at, cost of living and how people are working full-time and still can't afford to live. And then, all of the reports in the nonprofit sector is we don't pay enough. People are subsidizing their own work. You have to be able to, either have somebody else who's also making money in your family, or roommates, or, there's significant challenges. And so as an organization, how do we meet that? Well, COVID-19 highlighted for us that we didn't need to mandate people live in Montreal. Montreal's expensive. I mean, relative to Toronto, it's not expensive, but Montreal's expensive. And mandating that people move and live and come into an office, that's expensive. And so people can now live wherever they want, wherever they choose, wherever they can have internet access and not want to meet with me at like 5 o'clock in the morning, because that's not productive for anyone. And then there are people that value community. And so we have spaces like this where we buy memberships for staff. If they want to go to co-working space, if they want to have that community, there are opportunities to do that, even though it's not necessarily our staff. So we now have people living in the bustling metropolis of Cambridge, Ontario, it's me, and Bogota, Colombia, and in Barbados, and in Brazil, and just around the world. And that allows for the reduced cost of living. There's reasons why they're there that make life easier. And then, perhaps an even more controversial one, we went to a 4-day work week. We're coming up on 2 years now. And it has been the best thing that we've ever done as far as recruitment, mental health, just ability to live this value while still being producing and being innovative and being in the right spaces. And we have our own internal research that we've done. We're pretty small scale, but the research is coming out more and more globally. The global 4-day work week study out of the UK. There's a recent one released out of the US and Canada. There's been some municipalities that have started, and there are different models, right? So for us, Friday is the day that we don't work. And if people need to do something on Friday, we have the schedule send is our friend, right? So we don't disturb each other on Fridays. If it's better for us to do something, everyone gets gets their emails at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday. But for some organizations that are more directly customer centric, there oftentimes needs to be a split where there's all 5 days have people that are working, and that's a possible model as well. So, and then we provide an employee engagement fulfillment fund, and really it's not a lot, but it's something to recognize, like, you know, do you want training, or do you want you know, something physical, or like, what is it that is going to improve your mental health the most? I see Murry standing up, so I'm going to be quick on the last one. So, was quick. I mean, you know, I don't need to be on my soapbox a lot, but maybe I do a little bit. You know, we're existing in a time, a really messy time, and a messy time that data and technology is facilitating, right? So, you know, we're living through a live stream genocide. We're living through an ignored ethnic cleansing. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on that it's difficult to survive, difficult to exist without acknowledging, you know, our role in it. And so when I think about, as an organization, as an individual, as a leader, I'm trying to think, and this is necessarily the most messy part of surviving change. And this is I don't know what to do with it, right? Other than, like, we need to have these conversations. And so, you know, we at Open North are creating spaces, and we have conversations, and we allow for the difficult questions. And you know, looking at how do we do hard things? How do we use our influence? I was having a conversation with a partner the other day, and his big thing was where they do banking, right? And that, you know, their banking is investing their money in places that they can align with in the values. And I was, you know, that's phenomenal. We're a nonprofit, you know, so like our money is pretty meaningless in the scope of things. However, we are reliant on Google, right? Google's not pretty, you know, like Google is, you know, facilitating some pretty awful things. Is there a way to shift away from that, right? So having these conversations, figuring out how to do the hard thing. We're not all going to leave Google and begin no tech for apartheid. We're not all going to be able to camp out on college campuses, but there are difficult conversations that we can have, both, you know, individual and as organizations. Over to you. Am I staying up here?
Yeah, could I call the other two speakers up, please? Kevin, I apologize, we're cutting into your time. Good, thank you. So does anyone have a question from the audience for these three presenters? Samir.
Yeah, it's not for me. I don't know if this might be going on.
Here, you can use this.
Thanks, Murry. These questions came from our online audience.
Okay.
I think they're directly related to Christine, so I'll direct them to you. Is first, what are some of the key data sources to help tackle climate change? And then talking a little bit more about the key performance measures for climate change.
Is this, oh, it's on. Thank you, Samir, for those two questions. The sources of data, the ones that are probably most relied upon, at least from the municipality, are generated by our federal government, Environment Canada, and NRCan. Particularly, NRCan is the source of our, we call it the emissions factor that we rely on to generate our own emissions inventory. And they do provide a national inventory report, NIR, which actually just came out. It comes out every spring. So that is the source that municipalities and, as far as I understand, most of the provinces will also rely on, at least from a public sector perspective. And then when we go globally, we look at the IPCC for what they have been generating through their summary reports. And they do set the methodologies that we use, at least for emission reduction. Important KPIs, probably the only one I think anybody, if I look at KPIs, key performance indicators, as outcome-based indicators as opposed to progress, which would be metrics. I don't know if you're getting into the semantics of that. But the only framework that or the only true KPI that I would say is in existence is emissions reductions, because we are actually tracking, not just tracking the progress of them, but we have targets. So we know what we want the outcome to be. So that's the primary one that's out there for looking at climate change. But where we're getting to are KPIs for accountability, which I think is really exciting. There's an accountability framework for carbon, which goes beyond just the carbon inventory. So C40s is a group that you might want to have a look at. And Oslo is probably the lead country that municipality that looks at not just their carbon inventory, but they create a carbon budget, which is really about how much carbon can we spend year over year. And they translate that for our financial folks and put it into our financial spreadsheets and come out with a climate budget that really should be integrated with our capital budget, as per my presentation.
Is there another question?
Hi, a couple of you talked about failures and doing the right thing, even if it's difficult. So there's this fear of failure when it comes to open data in the private sector and in the public sector and in publicly funded nonprofits. Whereas in the private sector, it's welcomed. I'm in academia now. We also are open about it. So how do we address that fear of failure, especially when it comes to releasing data sets? Hey, there might be a mistake in it. Hey, it might have bad data in it. How do we overcome that issue? I think that's holding a lot of data sets back.
Anybody want to jump in? Dan?
From our experience, we certainly were concerned about a lot of the data that we were releasing, knowing that our data sets are not perfect. And we were really looking for people to be able to comment on them and provide feedback. But we also recognized if we were trying to release perfect data, we'd never put anything out. So there is a balance there. There's benefit in improving your data and going back and fixing anything that is there that's wrong. But an organization our size, we have bad data, and it comes in dirty. You do the best you can with it. So I think really it's a matter of kind of accepting that it's not going to be perfect, taking the feedback when you get it, and making those changes as you can.
I would maybe challenge a little bit that private sector has no problem opening data. And I think the concerns in private sector and in public sector are often similar, and it's a competitive advantage, and it's an exposing of shortcomings, right? And so, I think for us, there's two messages that we provide. One is that there are advantages, or there are ways to share and provide data for the common good, for benefit, without opening it, and that's an intermediary step. And then the second one is a focus on data governance, right? If you have a committee established, you have a framework established, recognizing that open data is connected to data quality, is connected to data silos, is connected to metadata. There's a lot of things that come into open data, and a lot of perspectives and a lot of expertise that is not going to come from one person or one department. And so at the city level, if you're establishing a data governance committee, you have different perspectives that come in on how you prepare data to be released or to be shared.
Okay, that's great. We've heard from all of the panelists, so another round of applause for this panel.